Hey everybody. So, I didn't really have much in mind for a video. Just thought I'd shoot one because, well, it's what brings in the feedback. Feedback like the following. Actually, I just now read this for the first time. This is from Kevin W. He's been listening to the C-Realm podcast for many years and providing excellent feedback. Somebody else wrote a pretty long, well thought out, clearly proofread comment to my self-ownership video, and I pinned that one. I'm not going to read it right now, but it is by no means me playing favorites. This is just the one that's on my other phone right now. So, Kevin writes, this is a very intriguing and interesting suggestion. And if you didn't see the other video, the suggestion basically is just that Roe versus Wade bases the right to abortion on the right to privacy, a right which is not actually explicitly described in the Constitution. So it's kind of a shaky basis upon which to, uh, you know, build any sort of other rights. And I thought, well, why not build an explicit right into the Constitution via an amendment, and let's make it the right to self-ownership. Your body's an object, and you, the non-corporeal person, own it. It's yours. And, various rights could be based on that principle of self-ownership. I'm not, for an instant, I don't have any glimmer, any faint, even notion that this is something that will actually happen. This is just me going blah, blah, blah into the camera and other people listening and thinking, and, adding to the conversation. So we're just doing more of that. Kevin writes, this is a very intriguing and interesting suggestion, especially if combined with some sort of age of majority requirement. Ownership of something implies responsibilities as well as rights. So we could easily make a case that self-ownership is the most sublime privilege of ownership of them all, and thus requires the owner, self, to be a legal adult, possibly even sneaking in some education and training requirements, like for a driver's license, before you receive your own pink slip. Having an age requirement could allow us to roll several other laws in there too for logic and simplicity, such as alcohol and tobacco use. It is only logical to say that when you own yourself, you can choose whatever substances to put into your own bloodstream. Obviously, this is another long-standing libertarian principle, one which our current laws are clumsily aping. That would eliminate the quibble that you raised about teenagers with uninformed life experiences and temporarily depressed hormones making those decisions. Can't off yourself till you're 21, kid. It'd still mark a clear logic in favor of abortion, because no matter what people might argue about whether a fetus is alive or human or a person, a fetus simply hasn't reached the age of majority, so it needs other people to make decisions on its behalf. That in turn implies that the natural choice of decision maker is the mother, not the state, which takes a little wind out of the sails of conservative natural law type arguments. And I'll just pause there and say I'm not conversant enough in conservative natural law type arguments to summarize them. Kevin continues, I guess one drawback might be that some parents would consider their children to be their property and abuse them. It's not as if that never happens right now, currently. In the end, though, I really think the entire existing U.S. governmental structure would not permit such a thing to come to pass. Our government, like a lot of other governments, really seems to believe that the citizens are the property of the government. I really think that most of the geriatric politicians in power now, at the back of their minds, keep alive the possibility of reinstating the draft if Russia or China ever invades us, Red Dawn style, ludicrous as that may be in the 21st century. I'll just pause and say, if the United States was actually being invaded by some foreign military force, you wouldn't need a draft. There would be plenty of people, more people signing up, to defend their country than I think the military could process easily. And then in parentheses, Kevin writes, most of our geriatric politicians aren't native to the 21st century. Well, neither am I. End parenthetical. Kevin continues. Look, for example, at how many measures the politicians proposed to force people to go back to their jobs when they declared coronavirus permanently over. When taking away their coronavirus emergency payments and unemployment didn't work, several different politicians proposed literally sending the police or the National Guard to force able-bodied people back to their workplaces. displays a certain attitude by the government towards the citizens. Ironic, of course, because the American criticism of the communist countries in the 70s and 80s was that the communists treated their own citizens as a natural resource, assigning them jobs and not letting them move out, or even travel. Well, the United States treats its own citizens as an economic resource to be exploited too, just in somewhat different ways. Self-ownership would eliminate that. Or it could if it was actually enacted and understood, and accepted. But, arguably, it's impossible, really, to pass or to ratify amendments to the Constitution anymore, which is why we don't even try. The requirements for ratification are so high that it just wouldn't happen, so nobody bothers. You could argue that if a self-ownership amendment to the Constitution not only was enacted by, the Congress, but actually ratified by the states, that it would de facto mean that we really had taken that on board as part of our national identity. That humans really are, they own themselves. That their body is an object and that they, the non-corporeal part of the person, owns that object and can dispose of it as they see fit, but more importantly, deny others the right to abuse that property or that object. Could it happen? I mean, we can conceive of it. We can conceive of alien invasions and, turning into unicorns. We can conceive of all kinds of stuff. I have no expectation whatsoever that it's going to happen. But then the question becomes, well, if that's just nonsensical, if it's just mental masturbation to even talk about it, why talk about it? And, one thing is, I'm not against masturbation. I certainly don't criticize anybody else for engaging in it. Even if it is mental masturbation, even if I think that, what they're talking about has no relevance whatsoever to the real world. Why? Why do I not demand that people be relevant in their conversation? Well, one, we all have a lot of time on our hands. Now, you might feel harried. You might be working multiple jobs and feel that you don't have a lot of time on your hands, but you're listening to me. So, you've got some spare attention. And, communication can go awry for sure, but I think it's a safe baseline assumption to say that the more communication, the better. And even if we're just talking nonsense, but it's sort of like physical exercise. You might not be running from a tiger. You might not be running to save a dying child, or a child drowning in the river, or rescue somebody from a burning building. But just doing sprints prepares you to do those things in the way that examining arguments and playing with concepts collaboratively with other people using the tools of Facebook and smartphones, not Facebook, YouTube. That's what you're watching this on, YouTube. That using these tools to weigh, examine, and collectively propose and refine ideas might come in handy later, that it might build skills that come in handy later. I've spent the last several hours listening to podcast interviews by Douglas Murray. He's got a new book out, The War on the West, I think it's called, and Jonathan Haidt, author of The Righteous Mind, and then I think more recently, what's that new book? I haven't read it, so I can't really bring it to mind real quick. The Coddling of the American Mind. That's the one he was just talking about in this podcast I was just listening to. And, to hear these guys talk, like psychologically, we're unhinged as a culture right now, and I tend to agree. Jonathan Haidt is talking about how things are likely to get worse for the duration of the 2020s, and then maybe there's a possibility for something better, which dovetails with George Friedman's notion that there are cyclical patterns to U.S. history in particular, but generally First World or European history, and that particularly in the U.S., we have these two different cycles. There's an institutional cycle and there's a socio-political cycle. And they've always come due at different times. And now, for the first time in the history of the country, they are both cycles are ending at the same time, which is, it's like, the sunspot cycle where you've got different solar cycles that run, they run concurrently, but they peak and trough alternately. And then every now and again, they sync up and you get some, massive period, this, really energetic period of solar activity, which can create havoc, particularly in a high-tech information tech society. So George Friedman, in his book, which I've talked about many times, I can't bring the title to mind just now. He talks about, I'll put it on screen. He talks about how the 2020s, both of these cycles are going to end near the end of the 2020s and start again. The 2030s will be a time of renewed hope, renewed optimism, renewed, he doesn't use this word, but, quoting Ibn Khaldun, Asabiyyah, social cohesion. Tribal societies, societies that have to form, they have to rely on social bonds and social solidarity in order to generate the necessary cohesion and social organization to even survive. As things improve for them, as their cooperative efforts pay off and things get better, they tend to lose that social cohesion, or that asabiyyah. And ours is is pretty beat up just now, missing even. But it can and probably will come back. By then, though, I mean, what is this, 2022? That's 8 years from now. I'll be in my early 60s. I'd like to imagine that I'll look even better then than I do now, and that I'll be even more nimble of mind and thought and speech. But in all likelihood, I will have ossified somewhat, and probably be even grumpier than I am now, and possibly, even more curmudgeonly. So at that point, I might, be beyond talking to, at least by the young people. We'll see. All right. That's me talking. Now it's your turn. I look forward to reading what you write. Stay well.